Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Danandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari and Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Paramahansa Dravida Dasa Ashtotar the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Dravida Dasa Ashtotar the Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Can you turn this up just a little bit? Just a little bit, because I don't want to wake up to Vijay. He takes rest at 7 o'clock. I know he did, but it's too short. It's too soft. Strain my voice. Hi, Bopper. Okay, we're on page 697. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Ed. Sudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 10th day of August 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are on page 697. We are in chapter 18, entitled Conclusion, the Perfection of Enunciation. Text number 56. 697. Sarvakarmanyapi sada kurvano madvipashrayah matprasaradavapnoti shastratam padamavyayam sarvakarmanyapi sada kurvano madvipashrayah matprasaradavapnoti shastratam padamavyayam sarvakarmanyapi sada kurvano madvipashrayah matprasaradavapnoti shastratam padamavyayam Alex. Sarvakarmanya pisada kumano madvapashayaha matpasadada bhapnoti shashvatam padamabhyayam. Go ahead, Glenn. Sarvakarmanya pisada kumano madvapashayaha matpasadada bhapnoti shashvatam padamabhyayam. Ed, go ahead. Go ahead. Sarvakarmanya pisada mud vipashraya pashraya kovano mud vipashrayaha matpasadada bhapnoti shashvatam padamabhyayam. Bhavaji's. Sarvakarmanya pisada kovano mad vipashrayaha matpasadada bhapnoti shashvatam padamabhyayam. Sarva, all karmani activities, api, although, sada, always, kovanaha, performing, mat vipashrayaha, under my protection, mat prasadat, by my mercy, avapnoti, one achieves, shashvatam, the eternal, padam, abode, abhyam, imperishable. Translation. Krishna says to Arjuna, though engaged in all kinds of activities, my pure devotee, under my protection, reaches the eternal and imperishable abode by my grace. Purport. The word madvyapashayaha means under the protection of the Supreme Lord. To be free from material contamination, a pure devotee acts under the direction of the Supreme Lord or his representative, the spiritual master. There is no time limitation for a pure devotee. He is always 24 hours a day, 100% engaged in activities under the direction of the Supreme Lord. To a devotee who is thus engaged in Krishna consciousness, the Lord is very, very kind. In spite of all difficulties, he is eventually placed in the transcendental abode of, or Krishna Loka. He is guaranteed entrance there. There is no doubt about it. In that supreme abode, there is no change. Everything is eternal, imperishable, and full of knowledge. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Shri Parampara. Alex Prabhu, can you shut that door except for a little? And tell them that the sound carries. They can't, okay, they're gone now. But there's a great illusion. You just walk out that door and we can't hear you in here. No, just leave it open somewhat. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Did I do Om again? Thank you. Okay. So, Krishna is now ready to give us the final instructions of the Bhagavad Gita. We've had some very important verses. Last two verses are both extremely often quoted. 54, Brahmabhuta Prasanatma Nashochati Nakanchati. One who is thus transcendently situated once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward every living entity. In that state he attains pure devotional service unto me. So I think I mentioned last time we spoke about the relationship of this verse to the 26th verse of the 14th chapter. So let's look at that one really quickly. We can see how these kind of support each other. Now this is the chapter about the modes of nature. And in these last few verses he's telling Arjuna what the qualities are of one who transcends the modes, what his activities are, and how how he transcends the modes. And this is the verse describing how he transcends the modes. I'll say, you say. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samati chartan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Now notice that word brahma bhuyaya. That's the same word, a little different, usage of it, of Brahma Bhuta, which is the verse that we just read in the text verse before. One who engages in full devotional service, that's you. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once attains transcends the modes of material nature, and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So here you have the means of coming to the Brahma Bhuta platform is of the Abhicharani Bhakti, in the undeviating devotional service. Transcend the modes and then you come to Brahma. Fine. But here in 54, you have coming to the Brahma Bhuta platform and then attaining Bhakti. You see that? Mad Bhakti. What gives? Which comes first? The Brahma Bhuta or the Bhakti? So, did I explain? So somebody hadn't heard my understanding of this. So one of these talks about Bhakti Yoga in text 26. By practicing Bhakti Yoga, which means the principles of devotion, sadhana bhakti, vaidhi bhakti, according to rules and regulations, one transcends the modes of nature. You come to the mode of goodness and then hopefully pure goodness. And that's synonymous, really, with Brahma Bhuta platform. So then gets Brahma Bhuta. But here, in the previous verses to text 54, he gave 3 verses describing how one comes to Brahma Bhuta platform. And it's all about controlling the mind, determination, giving them the sense gratification. There's no mention of bhakti here. This is a different way. In other words, he's describing the qualities of one in Brahma Bhuta, becoming those. And then, in that stage, one attains bhakti. Now, this is the distinction between bhakti and bhakti yoga. Actual bhakti, we need to get some silicone oil. Remind me. I have something for that. Here it says Mad Bhakti, and the other one says Bhakti Yoga. So, by practicing Bhakti Yoga, the principles of devotional sadhana bhakti, one transcends the modes of nature. And hopefully at the end, you come to the pure goodness and you actually attain bhakti with that Bhakti Yoga. You understand? Bhakti Yoga can mean different things. So here, he's talking about being in that Brahma Bhuta platform and attaining that bhakti, which means the exchanging of love with Krishna, loving devotion. And therefore, the next verse, text 55, Bhakti amam abhijanati. By such bhakti alone can I be understood. In other words, he can be understood in truth when one really achieves the platform of constant devotional service to Krishna. Then he reveals himself in full. Before that, progressively, you get revelations. So now, the text we read today, Sarva Karma Nyabhisiddha, you're in the Brahma Bhuta platform when you're practicing bhakti, and you ultimately can enter into the spiritual world. So here he's saying how one can apply that pure consciousness in this world, because after all, he wants Arjuna to surrender and to fight, right? In other words, it's moving to that. So here he says, in all your activities, just take shelter of me. In other words, if all of our activities are in the realm of devotional service, every breath, every step, every thought is connected to Krishna. And that's what Prabhupada describes in his little purport here. There's no time limit, meaning that it's 24 hours a day. Dreaming, also of Krishna's service, Then that's what the standard is. He's giving a very high standard. This is the conclusion of Gita. Madhya Pashriya, meaning full shelter of me. The mind, the mind, activities, intelligence activities, senses, everything that we have is purified because it's in connection with Krishna. And the flow of bliss that you're feeling means that why ever give it up? In other words, in the material world, we're used to going from one thing to another, because nothing really satisfies. Even if you achieve some intermediary goal, and you say, now finally I achieved this position, this name, this whatever it may be, it's soon, okay, then what's next? I'm not getting unending happiness from this, money or whatever it is. So now you go to something else. And that's the material sphere. it's Maya Sukhaya, meaning that it's illusory happiness. In other words, Prahlad gives the example of the, what is it? Mrigatrishni Rupa. It has the nature of a mirage. Mirage, can, for foolish people or animals, if they're very thirsty in the desert, they think, oh, thank God, there's a lake, and they run to the lake, and there's nothing there. You can die from that. And that's what all this material world is. It's a desert, right? Or something, it's like an ocean, a desert, a forest fire, something dangerous. And what are we looking for in a desert? Water, But what's available? Little drops, little drops that are just a little frustrating. It seems to be quenching your thirst, but it really isn't, and you're never satisfied, and then you die, and you go on to something else. And that's the nature of this material world. So imagine being in a state where there's this constant flow of ananda, of bliss. Not just sukha, maya sukhaya, but actually in fulfilling happiness. Why would you stop and do something else? You wouldn't. You'd be well situated in your constitutional position, and that's our actual nature. We are by nature as full of bliss as Krishna. That's our nature. But because we're tiny, we can be overcome and covered by the material energy and lose that connection. But we don't lose our desire to be in full bliss. And so we're searching throughout the material world and frustrated. So that's what he's describing here. All your activities always are under my shelter, meaning engaging in devotional service to me. By my mercy, by my grace, you will attain that eternal position, Shashvatam Paramabhyam, in the spiritual world. In other words, if you do that here, if you come to on this platform, to the point where the flow of bhakti is uninterrupted, this famous undeviating or unalloyed devotion Prabhupada talks about, unflinching, then you can feel the presence of the Lord, even in this world. It's described somehow, for the great devotees, there's no difference. They feel that they're back to Godhead even while on this plane. Prabhupada would say, I may be sitting here on 2nd Avenue. You ever hear those old lectures? He would always have the door open in case someone would walk in. But I remember that storefront, believe it or not. Although I was, at that time, I lived on Long Island. I would go into the city often. And my way back was driving down 2nd Avenue, and I would get onto the Manhattan Bridge and cross over. So I remember, I had to stop for gas once on the corner. I was literally two storefronts away. I didn't really see the storefront, but I know the area. I know this is, and it's just like a little sidewalk, and then there's this 2nd Avenue. It's a major artery downtown going south on Manhattan. And that's what you hear, the grinding of the gears, the stopping and starting, with the kids playing outside. And Prabhupada insisted to have those doors open in case anyone wanted to walk in. But he would say, I'm not really feeling like I'm here. I've never left Vrindavan. I'm still in Vrindavan because his consciousness is always there. And he's seeing everywhere the Lord of Vrindavan and serving. So that's the consciousness he's describing here. And my pure devotee, under my protection, reaches the eternal and perishable abode by my grace. So this is what we can strive for, to get that state where even on this plane, we're connecting everything to Krishna. Our every thought, or every word, or every action, our aspirations are within the realm of devotional service. That's what Prabhupada set up this movement for. And the idea is that go for it. And it seems like a big mountain to climb. Maybe we can't reach it in this lifetime. No loss. No loss. This is, you have to expand your horizons. Is that we've been through many, many lives, and we will never die. And when the body falls, maybe we won't be completely pure, and we'll have a chance in the next lifetime. I don't know if I want to come back to this planet the way it's looking at, but somewhere we'll engage in devotional service. Okay, moving along. All these verses are wonderful. They're all kind of coming to a climax here. Text 57, unless there's a question or comment. We have the mic ready in case there is. I'm going to get it. Chetasat sarva karmani mai sanyasya matparaha buddhi yogam apashritya mat chitta satatam bhava. Now those who read the Gita like, oh, there's Buddhi Yoga again. We heard about that in the second chapter, and Prabhupada kept coming back to it, and I better refer to it in this purport. In all activities, just depend upon me, and work always under my protection. In such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. Purport. When one acts in Krishna consciousness, he does not act as the master of the world. Just like a servant, one should act fully under the direction of the Supreme Lord. A servant has no individual independence. He acts only on the order of the master. A servant acting on behalf of the Supreme Master is unaffected by profit and loss. He simply discharges his duty faithfully in terms of the order of the Lord. Now, one may argue that Arjuna was acting under the personal direction of Krishna, but when Krishna is not present, how should one act? If one acts according to the direction of Krishna in this book, as well as under the guidance of the representative of Krishna, then the result will be the same. The Sanskrit word matparaha is very important in this verse. It indicates that one has no goal in life save and except acting in Krishna consciousness just to satisfy Krishna. And while working in that way, one should think of Krishna only. Quote, I have been appointed to discharge this particular duty by Krishna. Close quote. While acting in such a way, one naturally has to think of Krishna. This is perfect Krishna consciousness. One should, however, note that after doing something whimsically, he should not offer the result to the Supreme Lord. That sort of duty is not in the devotional service of Krishna consciousness. One should act according to the order of Krishna. This is a very important point. That order of Krishna comes through disciplic succession from the bona fide spiritual master. Therefore, the spiritual master's order should be taken as the prime duty of life. If one gets a bona fide spiritual master and acts according to his direction, then one's perfection of life in Krishna consciousness is guaranteed. So, in all activities, just depend upon me and work always under my protection. So to be fully conscious of me. Now, notice the word sannyasya is there. My sannyasya. So, the title of this chapter is the perfection of enunciation. So, at the beginning, we heard about sannyas and tyaga. Yeah, is it yours? That give him the mic. Oh, you want to change the mic? All right. Hare Krishna. All right. It's the Vijay level. I mean, you can hear me, but I'm just wondering how it's projecting. Is it okay? All right. Okay, good. So, this dependent work always under my protection. So this sannyas is here. The sannyas, of course, is an ashram. But it's also, more importantly, a state of mind, a state of kind, an attitude. It means that whatever you're doing, the result is given over to Krishna. You know, and you can see how it kind of merges this idea of charity and sacrifice. You remember the chapter we talked about at the beginning, how one should never give up these three things: jagya, dana, and tapa, which is sacrifice, charity, and austerity. And you can see they're really integrated into the life of devotional service. What is sacrifice? Well, there's so much sacrifice. You're sacrificing time right now. You know, when you talk about yajna, immediately you have to, you know, in this movement, you come to Sankirtan yajna. So what do you have to sacrifice? Well, some time, little energy, dancing back and forth. Sometimes you sacrifice your voice after a few hours. But what you don't have to do is, you know, pay for like 100 Brahmins to come, and then another 100 to be the referees on the first 100. I don't know if you know that. There's a whole thing. Every syllable has to be pronounced just exactly right, and the time of day, the year, you know, where you're doing it, the whole, and very expensive. You know, that's not part of it, because this is Kali Yuga. You know, we can hardly get it together to offer, you know, plastic jewels to the deities, what to speak of it. But so that's not necessary. But still, this Sankirtan Yajna is essential. That is the Yuga Dharma. But what's the most important element there? Your faith. There's a wonderful song about the marketplace Nityananda has opened a marketplace of the holy name. Vaisheshika loves to sing this song. You know, he likes to bring the Madanga, the classes, print it out. And really, you know, Lord Nityananda has come, you know, as Lord Chaitanya's representative, Balaram, you know, he's Krishna himself. And he's selling the holy name, you know, which is your salvation. In other words, it's the most valuable thing you could get. Oh, what's the price? Your faith. You have to have faith. Obviously, if you have no faith, you're not going to chant it, right? I mean, even people walk by when we used to go on Harinam. Maybe one day again we'll be able to go on Harinam. I mean, the dancing and chanting downtown type Harinam. Then, you know, a few people will come by. Some will repeat. They'll stop. A few will chant, you know. But really, they don't have much faith in it. You know, they're busy with something, you know, and it's a curiosity or whatever. But even if they just indifferently chant, the tremendous benefit. You know, knowing these descriptions in the Shastra of how beneficial it is just to hear the holy name. There's one in the 6th canto describing how just hearing one holy name, not chanting it, but just hearing it, you know, destroys all the karma and paves your way, you know, to everything auspicious. So that's a very great impetus to go out and, you know, make people hear the holy name. So the idea is that there is a place certainly for sacrifice. There's a place for charity, if you want. You know, charity means you give something that's valuable to you, for a good cause. Well, we know the best cause is spreading Krishna consciousness, you know. So whatever fruits we have, we give some of it to Krishna, you know, that we can, you know, we still have to keep body and mind together, body and soul together. But there's a place for charity. In a sense, you're giving your life breath, you know, you're giving everything. And of course, tapasya. I mean, Rishabdev, whenever I hear the word tapasya, I always think of Rishabdev. That famous verse, 5:5:1, where Prabhupada would quote all the time. When that book came out, this is the 5th canto. It was part of the marathon. It's 17 books marathon. And Prabhupada was in India. He gave, wherever he went, he would give a lecture on that verse. You hear, you know, if you listen to the tapes in order, you'll see, oh, here's a bunch of verses, you know, lectures all on that same verse. He did the same thing in Bhagavad Gita 7:1 in America. But why is it so important? Because Rishabdev is speaking to his sons, but he's speaking to the whole human race. Nayam deho deha bhajang loke kashtan kaman arate vidbhujange. He's saying, for those who have taken birth as human beings, all of us, you know, every one of us, it's not proper, you know, it's not fit for them to struggle so hard for the sense gratification that is in the category of what the stool-eating hogs enjoy. He actually uses that word, you know. So what's the alternative? He's speaking to his sons just before he takes sannyas, which is amazing. You know, when you read that story, what he goes through, he's like an avadut. You know, he wanders here and there, people insult him and everything. He's Krishna. He is Vishnu Tattva. There's no question about it. And it's in there in Bhagavatam, Prabhupada tells us, taking that role. So this is, you know, his final instruction. So he says, rather, human life is meant, it says, tapo divyam putraka, our sons. He's speaking primarily to his sons. There are many other great souls there. Yena sattvam shuddhyet. By tapasya, which is a certain kind of tapasya, which is aimed toward purification. And it's called divine austerity. Because austerities can be used for simply gaining power, like a Ranyakashipu or some linebacker or something, you know. Works throughout high school, you know, torturous austerity so he can make a few $1 million a few years before he wrecks his health in the NFL. That's austerity. But it's not tapo divyam. So what's the purpose? You know, to purify one's being. Sattvam shuddhit. What's the purpose of the purification? Yasmat brahma saukyam dhanantam. Because then you can become qualified to enjoy unending spiritual happiness. In other words, the end is still pleasure, but it's wholesome pleasure. It's unending pleasure. It's the pleasure of the soul contacting the Supreme Lord and engaging in devotional service. So that's definitely a part of devotional service because we're so conditioned. We need that purification, and so all those three are present. Obviously, the yajna, dana, and tapa in Krishna consciousness. So now he's describing here sannyasa, my sannyasa matparaha. It's similar to phrases like, this is a great one you can easily memorize because it rhymes. It rolls off the tongue. Narayana Parayana. The same thing as Matpara. Parayana is the same word. It means all one's thoughts, intelligence, words, Lakshmi, whatever you have at your disposal is dedicated to Krishna. That's Matparayana. Having no other goal in life than experiencing, bhakti and all of its different varieties and connecting with Krishna. And, that's Matparaha. So that's what Krishna describes here. In all activities, just dependently work always under my protection. Matpara is under my protection. Buddhi Yoga. It probably doesn't mention here, but Buddhi Yoga, from the second chapter on, it periodically comes up. It comes up in the 10th chapter also, where Krishna says, Tesham satata yuktanam vajatam priti purvakam tadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamapi yanti te. Ring a bell? Anyone? Kind of. Anyway, this is there's 4 essential verses in the Gita, 10, 8, 9, 10, 11, and this is 10. And what Krishna is saying there, first he these verses should be known, because if you want to, you don't have time to go through everything. This gives you the essence of the Gita. And Arjun's then verse, when he hears these, he's glorifying Krishna. Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavan. It's a good, wonderful definition of the Supreme Lord. You're the Supreme Brahman, the Supreme Abode, the Purifier, everything. So this is the third one. So he says, Aham Sarvasya Pabhavo, Mattak Sarvam Bhavartate. He's answering the quest of the Vedanta Sutra, which says you should, as a human being, you should inquire into the absolute truth. He says, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. You have to be curious, inquisitive about Brahman, the absolute truth, which is the source of everything. Tato Brahma Jigyasa. What is that? Does anyone know the second one? You know it. When I repeat it, you know it. All right, we're going to all learn it tonight. It's only 4 syllables. Janmad Yasya Yataha. Or with the kicker, it's 5. Okay. So here's the definition of the Vedanta Sutra. It's a sutra. It means in these explanations. It's a little aphorism. So Janma means birth, and Adi means etc. See, Janmadi Asya. One thing to try to remember, because everyone always trips over this, we had several of these, is that in the first verse we started, 56, Sarva Karman Yapisada. When you have a word like karmani, which is activities, it ends in an I, right? Karmani, short I. It can be short I or long I, it doesn't matter. And the next word begins with a vowel, such as api. That I turns into a Y. And in chanting it, the Y is pronounced with the next word. So it's Sarva Karman Yapi Sada. Remember, he's tripping over those. So try to remember that next time we encounter one. So, where was I? Oh, yeah. Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo. Well, yeah, it's not at the end. It's within the line. The reason why that I became a Y is because there's a word after it. So it can be anywhere. So, he says, Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo Mattak Sarvam Bhavartate. So then so Krishna's answering or expanding on that second Vedanta Sutra. And in fact, the first whole verse of the Bhagavatam, 111, begins with those words. Janmad Yasya Yaton Vayaditatastartes. It expands on it. Oh, it's Krishna who's, creates everything. He enlightened Brahma, everything. That's all. So, I am the source of everything. Everything emanates from me. Those are the first 2 lines, or the first line, if you want it that way. So he's answering that question. What does everything come from? Your Janma. And the Adi is, and what sustains everything, and what is it, when everything is annihilated, what does it merge into? In other words, Krishna is there. This is also in the 4 essential verses of Bhagavatam. He's there before there's anything manifested. Everything is drawn within the body of Mahavishnu, that whole thing, And then when it comes out, it's nothing but him and his energies and his expansions, the super soul, his plenary expansions and his energy expansions. And we're part of the energy expansion, right? A certain category of energy, the Tatastha Shakti. And then when everything is drawn back into him, he still exists. in the spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan. So that's the definition of God. That's the Param Brahman. That's the Supreme Brahman. Very important, right there in the first verse of these 4 essential verses. Then the second half of the verse, he describes what is called Abhideya. Remember these 3? Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojan. So the Abhideya is the practice. Okay, now that I know that you're God, what should I do? Aham savasya bhavavam mattak sarvam iti madva bhajante mam. Those who know this, they worship me. Bhajanti mam buddha bhava samandata. They're intelligent. Intelligent, who understand this. How do they worship me? With everything they got. Buddha bhava samandvita means with their body, mind, words, everything. This is matpara, you see. So then he says, how do they do it? How do they worship? Matchitta, madgata prana, bodhiyantak parasparam. They put their minds on me. Now, how we do that in this age, especially chanting the holy name, that's our yoga. That's but connecting with Krishna, matchitta, and gata prana, their life energy, their work, all the senses, the 10 senses, everything, mind, body, words, they connect to me. Madgata prana, it's gone to me. Their life energy. See? And bodhiyantak parasparam, what we're doing here, meeting together and mutually discussing Krishna, glorifying Krishna. The essence of all that, Harinam Sankirtan. That I chant, you hear, you chant, I hear. That's bodhiyantak parasparam. Katayantashtamam nidyan, they're always speaking about me, glorifying me. Katayantashtamam tushyanti chadamandicha. And they're fully satisfied in this way and enjoying spiritual happiness. Tushyanti chadamandicha. Now, for those who do this, what do I do? So this is prayojana. He's reciprocating. This is how he reciprocates. So it's tesham satata yuktanam. For those who are always linked to me in this way, in yoga, in bhakti yoga, tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam. They're worshiping me with love, because the love is naturally there. It comes out when you're doing this. Then it grows. It manifests. Priti pur dadami buddhi yogam tam. I give them the intelligence by which they can connect to me. In other words, this buddhi yoga means that their whole being, their intelligence, mind, everything, becomes enlightened with me. Dadami buddhi yogam yena mam papiyanti. And by that buddhi yoga, by that intelligence, they can come to me. Buddhi yogam yena mam upayanti te. By which they come to me. And then the last one is even more intimate reciprocation. Say tesham evanukampartam ahama jnana jamtamaha nashiyam yata bhavasto jnana dipena basata. Anukampa. Now think what this word means. Let's take it apart. Sanskrit is such a wonderful language. Kampa. Now kampa is one of the symptoms of ecstasy, trembling, right? Now anukampa means trembling in sympathy. In other words, Krishna, this is a word for compassion. He's feeling for us. He wants to help us come to him. Because we're dedicating everything, we're working hard, trying to, our life airs and glorifying him, we're following the practices, So what is he doing? He's giving us more and more inspiration from within the heart. And out of his compassion, he destroys any remnants of ignorance in the heart with the shining lamp of knowledge. That's what he says in that last verse. Now this is said to be the 4 essential verses of Bhagavad Gita. And then Arjuna, he's enlightened with this, and he said, oh, you are the supreme Param Brahma Param Dhamma Param. And after he says that, and then he says, and it's not just me saying it, it's Vyasadeva and Asita Vyasa and Narada. He quotes, in other words, it's backed up. But, it's not. So then you were thinking, okay, Gita's over. He's revealed himself as God. Arjuna agrees. But no. Prabhupada so one would think, then Arjuna says, now can you please describe how I can see your glories within this material world? Why would he say that? In other words, he's already realized everything, He's realized Krishna is God. All right, now pick up the bowl, let's go and fight. No. But for us, we need to know that we walk down the ocean, oh, that's Krishna. I read it in the Bhagavad Gita, you see? And all this list of most amazing things that we see, or any amazing thing. We say, oh, that's Krishna's energy, with the spark of his splendor. The rest of the chapter engages. That's described. And the rest of the Bhagavad Gita, he's going over the themes that he touched on before and expanding on them. This whole thing with the modes of nature in the 14th chapter and other things. So anyway, it's coming back to this. So be fully conscious of me. So this is the state of pure devotional service that we should strive for, even if we feel we may not be able to achieve it. We should strive for it. Know the standard. Okay. Any questions on text 57 or others? Some of the things we dealt with. All right. The next one is really well known. Matchitta sarva durgani matpasarat tarishyasi atachetvam ahankaran nashrosisi vinankshyasi. Okay, so this is one of the many verses in the Gita, and you find in Bhagavatam, where there's a stark contrast. It's like, I don't know if anyone reads any more like Kierkegaard and those old philosophers. You remember, yeah. So he write, I think he wrote a book, called Either Or, something like that, right? And he was a heavy Christian, and he was and this is like that. Look, it's either, come back to Godhead, or you read about the alternative. All right, I'm sorry. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. Purport. A person in full Krishna consciousness is not unduly anxious about executing the duties of his existence. The foolish cannot understand this great freedom from all anxiety. For one who acts in Krishna consciousness, Lord Krishna becomes the most intimate friend. He always looks after his friend's comfort, and he gives himself to his friend, who is so devotedly engaged, working 24 hours a day to please the Lord. Therefore, no one should be carried away by the false ego of the bodily concept of life. One should not falsely think himself independent of the laws of material nature or free to act. He is already under strict material laws, but as soon as he acts in Krishna consciousness, he is liberated, free from the material perplexities. One should note very carefully that one who is not active in Krishna consciousness is losing himself in the material whirlpool, in the ocean of birth and death. No conditioned soul actually knows what is to be done and what is not to be done. But a person who acts in Krishna consciousness is free to act because everything is prompted by Krishna from within and confirmed by the spiritual master. So here's a very, very, just try to, expand our remembrance of what this movement's been through. What Prabhupada went through to start the movement. Coming alone. We just celebrated a few days ago, right? He was getting on the boat, that wonderful, fast. And, what he was completely in this mood. In other words, he was just confident that Krishna would, if I remembered Krishna, fully Krishna conscious, that all the difficulties, Durgani, it's not an accident that this whole place is called Durga. It's run by Durga. It means a prison house. Can't go. Durga means you can't go anywhere. Sarva Durgani, so all these difficulties, Mat Prasada Tarishasi, you will cross over them by my grace. Now Prabhupada is, fully, thinking of that and aware of that. On the boat, he's crossing over a big Durga, namely the ocean, and he had the heart attacks and, he had no money. I mean, you can imagine what he had. He had to be completely surrendered. So that's the first line there is the description of the pure devotee who's undertaken a seemingly impossible task, whatever it may be. Just like when book distributors started, why did it take so long? Because what are we going to do with all these books? Prabhupada had us print, I wasn't there, but I read the history, the TLC, the Teaching of Lord Chaitanya. That was one of the first books that came out in 1969. And I don't know how many they printed. It was printed in 5,000 maybe, Okay, there's like a handful of centers here, So you take 500, you take 500. And they just sat there. What are you going to do with them? Well, how do you sell books? All right, we'll go to the bookstore, see if they want to take a few on consignment, Okay, Prabhupada wants to distribute his book. So at a certain point, one was devotee, Buddhimanta. I think he was one of the pioneers right here in California. And they had some Krishna books, with them, and they had to get gas. So they had very little money, So he thought, well, maybe he'll take the Krishna book as a payment for the gas, $10 book, full color. I've seen those big Christian books, you know, the silver with so many paintings, and there's like 120 paintings in those 2 books. It's amazing. Some of them are not quite on the same quality as you find here, but they're all full of bhakti, you know. And so he was able to sell the book, get the gas for the book, you know. And so it was like the spark. So maybe we can do this, you know. And so they started going out, selling 5 books here, 5 books there, like a revelation, you know. It was like they thought, well, how can we do this? It's impossible. But it wasn't impossible. The desire was there, the order was there, you know. And after trying, that's the point. You know, Prabhupada went through so many difficulties, and he expected his disciples to do the same thing, and they also found it works. You try, it seems impossible, and then something happens and it works. In fact, you start a temple. He sent Shivananda to Germany alone to open up Germany. And he went to Frankfurt, I think it was. He must have been able to speak German, yeah. At a different time in my life, I might have been, if I had joined when I was 18, I might have sent me, because I took German in high school for 4 years. I'm glad I avoided that. Thank you, Christian. But he started, you know, what to do. Go out on the street and chant, you know, find an interested person, say, come back, you know, you got, you know. This is how it went. You should read this book called, by Vyasaki, it's an incredible book, Radha Damodar Vilas. And it's about two wonderful devotees, Vishnujan, became Vishnujan Swami, and Jayananda Prabhu. And it describes, I remember reading this, how Vishnujan he took sannyas, and he was one of the first sannyasis, and he just took off on a motorcycle with nothing but, you know, basically what he had on his back. And he went to Austin, Texas, because he knew that there was a school there which is kind of liberal. I think that he thought it would be good. And he sat down under a tree and started playing his drum, you know, whatever. I think he had a drum with him, and chanting Hare Krishna. And he was such a good chanter, you know, sweet. You know, people were attracted. And he had a few kids around, you know. And gradually he found, you know, a place to crash. You know, kind of crashed at night. And he started a center there. And he preached, and he made so many devotees. You know, this is how, just like, completely depending on Krishna. So this is the, you know, Matchitat Savadurgi Matprasada, by thinking of me, you will cross over. By my grace, you will cross over. But, on the other hand, if you do not work in such kind of act of not hearing me, you will be lost. And that's true for every conditioned soul. We're lost in this material world. You know, we have no idea how to achieve real happiness or security because there is none. So we strive in hopeful ways, but we're defeated every lifetime. You know, every life, it comes to the end. All our hopes are, you know, dashed, relationships. You die on your deathbed, dying, you know, they can't help you. It's described graphically in the Bhagavatam in several places. You know, this Jamil, you know, he got a second chance. But I remember that book, working on that book. And it's so dramatic. He's lying there, and there's a scene, there's a painting, and, you know, it's like an ordinary thing, except, of course, he has a son named Narayan, and he had some background. But they're all commiserating with him. They can't do anything for him, you know, and he's coming about. And even in the hospitals, I understand. I never had this experience because I worked in the hospital. But the nurses who deal with terminal patients, you know, terminal restlessness, where suddenly there's this fear, and what's that dog, you know, and they're just hallucinating, that they give them some drug, you know. But actually, they're intimating, they're seeing the Yamadutas, and, you know, it's coming to drag him out. And so he's experiencing that. He gets completely scared, and he cries out, Narayan! You know, for his little boy, you know, little son named Narayan. But the Narayan Dutas come. You know, they chanted the name, and they come and they fend off the Madutas. He gets a second chance. But that scene is classic. It's also in the third canto described. He's not so fortunate this one, and he goes to hell. You know, and everything. So this is one way or another. We all go through that. You know, we've been through it so many times. All your hopes, all your aspirations, all your relationships, or whatever you have in this life, it's all taken away. Krishna says, Sarva Amrityu Sarva Haraschaham. Prabhupada would often quote this line. This is from 10th chapter also. I take away everything as death. So everyone that wants to see God, well, okay, you know, if you don't see him as Krishna, you know, and worship in the original, then you'll see him as death. You know, all powerful, taking everything from you, and then you know not where you're going. So this is what we're facing. You'll be lost. If you don't hear me, you'll be lost. This is really, you know, so let's make sure we hear Bhagavad Gita regularly. Okay. Any comments or questions on this one? You can see how important these verses are. First Janmashtami? You mean after he landed? Yeah. Oh, he was on the boat. Yeah. That would describes how he said some things. He offered some prasadam,
That was described where?
It's in the Lilamrita. Yeah, whatever we know came from Prabhupada telling us.
Prabhupada said it, must have said it.
He described those. When he got on the boat, he was actually 68. We would say 68. He turned 69 on the boat. Although, I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you read through the books, the history, the Lilamrita, there's a real confusion with the age. Because in India, when you're born, I mean, it makes perfect sense, That's your first birthday, But you're not 1 year old yet. You see, this is the confusion. In America, I don't know, in England it's probably the same thing. Your first birthday is after you're 1 year old. So that's one. So that you can, how many years old you are, that's how many birthdays you had. So, but, Prabhupada, he had his 69th birthday, on the ship, Or was it the 70th? Anyway, I'm confused. But there was always like 1 year more because, there's that extra birthday thing. There was a little confusion in it. But they're not going to fix it.
So by Indian standards, he turned 70.
He was 70. Yeah, he was. Yeah. And that's why, he was 70 years old when he came, but he wasn't. He was 69.
Same thing with Bhaktisiddhanta taking sannyas also in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Isn't that also?
I'm sorry?
Isn't it the same thing with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu or Bhaktisiddhanta or both taking sannyas? We say 24, but it was technically.
Oh, that I never looked into that.
Technically 24 hours.
Yeah, I've never looked into that, but it may have carried over into that. Yeah, go ahead. You had a question. Go ahead. That's good enough.
I was working at Coronado. It was assisted living, like old people.
Oh.
It's on.
It's
And
VJ level.
there was a lady. She was almost gonna pass her body.
Uh-huh.
I went in there to check on her, and she was so frightened. She said, "Who's that sitting down?" And I said, I looked at the chair. There was nobody there.
Uh-huh.
And she said, "There's one with the tail like that."
No kidding.
She was describing creatures, and I looked and I said, "Okay, good night."
But when was this? Recently? Okay, so you weren't well, so you didn't give her a Hare Krishna. Oh, okay. Yamaduras. Yeah, it's scary. I mean, isn't it, and comforting to know that just like, chanting a little Hare Krishna, you can avoid that, I mean, we should strive for more, but that's just some of the benefits that you can, face these critical times of life, which we're all going to go through. I mean, ideally, it's just you're at peace. You can actually be at peace because you're confident. Krishna's there. You see, Krishna's coming. And there's also so many descriptions of that. Dhruva Maharaj, he puts his foot on the head of death and climbs into the Vaikuntha airplane. now that's confidence. All right, so it's late. So let me give you a quick poem. Here's a prayer from Rupa Goswami's, I think, Stavamala. It says, Madhuresh Madhuri, all M's. A tour de force of alliteration. Madhuresh Madhuri Mayamadava Munadi Mattalika Mugdha Mama Manana Mohana Modama Yamanaso Maha Maha Moham. O Master of Mathura, lovely Lord of Goddess Shri, who plays such maddening melodies upon your Murali. O Cupid's charmer, please redeem a life till now misspent by joyfully destroying my extreme bewilderment. We can pray like that. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.